Kang Daiho stood before the massive council chamber, his hands steady despite the weight of what was about to happen. The great hall stretched out like a cathedral, with 12 towering seats arranged in a perfect circle. Each seat held a different alien species, their eyes fixed on him with cold judgment. Ambassador Daiho, Elder Thoros spoke from the highest seat. His voice echoed through the chamber like thunder. The Valaxian's blue skin seemed to glow with authority. The council has reached its decision. Daiho felt his aide Park Minji tense beside him. She had been with him for 3 years, watching him fight for humanity's place in this galaxy. Now they both knew that fight was ending. After careful consideration, Thoros continued, the Galactic Council votes to expel humanity from civilized space. You have 30 standard days to withdraw all human presence from Council territory. The words hit Daiho like a physical blow. He had expected this, but hearing it still felt like watching his home burn down. Around the circle, alien faces showed no emotion. The spider-like arachnids clicked their mandibles in what might have been satisfaction. The crystal beings called resonance chimed softly, their song almost musical but cold. Elder Thoros, Daiho said, stepping forward. I request permission to address the council one final time. Thoros waved a clawed hand. Speak quickly, human. Daiho looked around the circle, meeting each alien gaze. For 50 years, humanity has served this council, faithfully. We have given you our medical knowledge that saved millions during the plague of Centauri, our agricultural techniques that ended famine on 7 worlds, our peacekeepers who died defending planets that were not even our own. His voice grew stronger. We ask not for special treatment, but for fairness. What crime have we committed, except being different? The insectoid representative from the Hive Collective buzzed its response. Your species is unstable, emotional, unpredictable. You make decisions with your hearts instead of logic. Our emotions make us dangerous, added the rock-like mountain folk representative. You cannot be trusted to remain peaceful. Daiho felt anger rising in his chest, but he forced it down. Getting angry now would only prove their point. Our emotions also made us the first species to make peace with the Void Pirates. Our unpredictability helped us find solutions when logic failed. Our hearts led us to save Council worlds when pure calculation said to abandon them. Exactly our point, Thoros said. You cannot be controlled or predicted. This makes you a threat to galactic stability. Park Minji stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. Elder Thoros, if I may. The Council fears human emotion, but what happens when you face a crisis that requires thinking outside established patterns? What happens when logic alone is not enough? The crystal resonant sang a dismissive note. Logic is always enough. Emotion leads to chaos. Emotion led us to cure the Red Death when your scientists said it was impossible, Minji replied. Emotion led us to broker peace between the Stellar Empire and the Trade Federation when they were ready for war. Emotion saved this council more times than you want to admit. For a moment, silence filled the chamber. Daiho saw something flicker in Thoros's eyes. Doubt, maybe, or regret. But then the moment passed. The decision is final, Thoros declared. Humanity will withdraw from all Council space within 30 days. Any human vessels found in Council territory after that time will be seized. In the observation gallery above, Li Jinwu watched the proceedings through a translator device. The captain of the human evacuation fleet had known this day might come. Behind him, his communications officer was already sending coded messages to every human colony and outpost. 30 days to evacuate 50 years of civilization. Deep in the human embassy, Choi Hyerin looked up from her laboratory equipment. The young scientist had been working on something special for months, something the Council had called impossible when she first proposed it. Quantum field manipulation, they said, was beyond current technology. They had laughed at her research proposals. Now, as alarms sounded throughout the embassy, she looked at her completed prototype, a small device that could bend space itself, making faster-than-light travel possible without the massive engines the Council species used. She had solved it just in time for it not to matter anymore, or maybe it mattered more than ever. Doctor, Choi, her assistant called from the doorway. We have to go. Captain Lee says all research materials must be packed immediately. Hiron nodded, carefully placing her device in a secured container. The council thought humans were too emotional, too unpredictable. They wanted logic and order above all else. But sometimes the greatest discoveries came from those willing to try what others called impossible. Over the next 30 days, the human exodus began. Ship after ship departed from colony worlds, space stations, and research facilities. Families packed their entire lives into cargo containers. Children who had been born on council worlds said goodbye to the only homes they had ever known. Captain Lee coordinated the massive evacuation from his command ship. Every day brought new challenges. The Stellar Pride colony had 15,000 residents to evacuate. The mining station at Kepler 442 had equipment too valuable to abandon, but too large to move quickly. The research facility on Titan III held irreplaceable data that could not fall into alien hands. Status report, Lee called to his bridge crew. Colony 7 is fully evacuated, reported his navigation officer. But the families from the outer settlements are still incoming. Another 6 hours minimum. The council patrol ships are getting closer, warned his tactical officer. They're not waiting for the full 30 days. Lee gritted his teeth. The council wanted humans gone, but they were making the process as difficult as possible. Ships were delayed at checkpoints. Cargo was inspected and sometimes confiscated. Children and elderly were given the same harsh treatment as military personnel. Ambassador Deho spent his final days on the council station trying to secure safe passage for the most vulnerable evacuees. The medical ships carrying critical patients. The research vessels with sensitive materials. The colony ships packed with families, please, he asked Thoros in their final meeting. These are civilians, children and sick people. Grant them safe passage through the neutral zone. Thoros looked at him with something that might have been pity. Your people chose to be different, Ambassador. Different has consequences. As the last human ship departed council space, Deho stood on the observation deck watching the stars. Beside him, Minji quietly wept for the home they were leaving behind. Where do we go now? She asked. Deho put a hand on her shoulder. Wherever we need to. Humans are good at starting over. Behind them, the council station grew smaller and smaller until it was just another point of light among the stars. Ahead lay the unknown regions beyond council space, where no civilized species dared to venture. The humans were going into the dark, alone. 5 years had passed since the ships left council space. Kim Sung-ho stood on the bridge of the colony ship New Seoul, watching the sunrise over their new world. The planet had no name in any council database. The humans called it Hope. Morning. Report, sir, said his second officer, bringing him a steaming cup of coffee, real coffee, grown in the hydroponics bay from seeds they had smuggled out of council space. Population? Sung-ho asked. 87,000 across all settlements. Birth rate is up 12% this year. The kids born here don't even remember the old worlds. Sung-ho nodded. Children born in exile were growing up free from council rules and restrictions. They asked questions the council would have called dangerous. They dreamed of things the council said were impossible. 3 systems away, Yang Soo-young wiped grease from her hands as she stepped back from her latest creation. The engineer had been working for months on a new type of engine that used quantum field manipulation. The council had said such technology would take centuries to develop. Soo-young had built a working prototype in her garage. Test results? She asked her assistant. Efficiency up 40% from last month. We can get from Hope to New Busan in half the time it used to take. Soo-young smiled. Without council oversight telling them what was possible and what was not, human innovation had exploded. Every settlement had become a laboratory. Every problem became a challenge to solve in new ways. Young Bae Tae-hyung was discovering just how much the galaxy had to offer beyond council space. His scout ship Dancing Star had found 12 systems in the past year alone. Not all had planets suitable for humans, but some held wonders the council had never imagined. Captain, his sensor operator called out. I'm reading massive structures in the asteroid belt, artificial structures. Tae-hyung leaned forward in his chair. First contact protocols had changed since leaving Council space. Humans no longer had to ask permission before exploring or making contact with new species. On screen, the view screen showed geometric shapes that hurt to look at directly, crystalline structures that seemed to bend light around them, and moving between them ships unlike anything in Council records. "Sir, we're being scanned," reported his communications officer. "Open a channel," Tae-hyung ordered. "All frequencies." The response came not as words but as mathematical concepts that somehow translated directly into understanding. Ancient, curious, cautious. "We are humans," Tae-hyung broadcast. "We come in peace. We seek knowledge and friendship." Again, concepts flowed into their minds. The beings called themselves something that meant those who dwell in the void. The Council had declared them extinct 1,000 years ago, but here they were, very much alive. Back on Hope, Han Yuna monitored communications across human space. Her job had evolved from simple message relay to something much more important. She was watching the birth of a new civilization. "Traffic report," she called to her team. 17 colony ships launched this month, reported her assistant. New settlements established in 4 systems. Trade volume up 30%. "Any word from Council space?" "Nothing official, but we're picking up increased military chatter. Something about territorial disputes between member species." Yuna frowned. The Council had always prided itself on maintaining peace through strict rules and harsh punishments. Without humans to mediate disputes, old conflicts were apparently resurfacing. On the planet that humans had named Freedom, Tae-hyung filed his report about the Void Dwellers. The ancient machine intelligences were not the mindless destroyers the Council had portrayed them as. They were artists, philosophers, and scientists who had withdrawn from galactic politics eons ago, when biological species became too rigid in their thinking. "They want to trade," Tae-hyung explained to the Colonial Council. "Not resources or territory. Ideas. They find human creativity fascinating." "What do they offer in return?" asked Governor Park. "Technology that makes Council science look primitive. Insights into space and time that could revolutionize everything. And protection from threats the Council doesn't even know exist." Within months, human settlements began incorporating Void Dweller technology. Shields that could stop anything. Weapons that bent reality itself. Ships that moved through dimensions the Council couldn't perceive. But the most valuable exchange was philosophical. The Void Dwellers had spent millennia perfecting logic and calculation. Humans brought emotion, intuition, and creative chaos. Together they began solving problems neither could handle alone. Meanwhile, in Council space, cracks were beginning to show. The first major conflict erupted between the Trading Federation and the Mining Collective over resource rights in the Epsilon sector. Without human mediators, negotiations quickly broke down into threats and military posturing. Elder Thoros found himself spending more time managing disputes between Council members than governing the galaxy. The Arachnids accused the mountain folk of territorial expansion. The Resonants claimed the Hive Collective was stealing their research. Old grudges that had been suppressed for decades burst into the open. "Perhaps we should contact the humans," suggested one junior council member during a particularly heated session. The chamber fell silent. For several moments no one spoke. "Absolutely not," Thoros declared. "We made the right decision. Humans were a disruptive influence. The current difficulties are merely adjustment periods." But privately, Thoros was beginning to have doubts. The Council had been stable for centuries before humans arrived, but it had also been stagnant. Human participation had brought problems, yes, but also solutions, innovation, growth. The plague that began in the agricultural worlds of the Rim systems might have been contained quickly if humans had still been part of the Council. Their medical researchers had always approached problems from unexpected angles. Their agricultural specialists had saved more worlds from famine than any other species. Instead, the plague spread. Crops failed across 7 systems. Food shortages led to unrest. Unrest led to demands for action from the Council. And the Council, for the first time in memory, had no good answers. "We need to increase food production in the core systems," suggested the mountain folk representative. "Impossible without disrupting our mining operations," replied the Industrial Coalition. "Then we must reduce population in the affected areas," said the Logical Collective. "You mean let people starve?" accused the Life Preservation Society. The arguments went in circles. Logic suggested multiple solutions, all of which conflicted with other logical imperatives. What they needed was someone willing to think outside the established patterns, someone emotional enough to prioritize saving lives over maintaining systems, someone human. But the humans were gone, scattered across the void beyond Council space. Building something new, something the Council couldn't predict or control, and for the first time since the founding of galactic civilization, Elder Thoros wondered if they had made a terrible mistake. In her communications center on Hope, Han, Yuna intercepted fragments of Council transmissions, emergency sessions, resource crisis protocols, military mobilization orders. "Should we offer assistance?" asked her deputy. Yuna considered the question. Many humans wanted nothing to do with the Council that had exiled them, but others remembered the good times, the sense of being part of something larger than themselves. "Not yet," she decided, "but keep monitoring. If they ask for help, they won't ask," her deputy said with certainty. "Too proud." "Maybe," Yuna replied, watching the data streams. "But desperation has a way of overcoming pride." The first attack came without warning. Jae-hyun was running silent patrol near the Council border when his sensors picked up the massive energy signatures. Ships unlike anything in the database were tearing through the outer defense stations of the Kepler defense grid. "Command, this is Scout 7, he whispered into his communicator. "I have eyes on unknown hostiles engaging Council forces. Count is holy stars. There must be hundreds of them." Through his scope, Jae-hyun watched the attackers move like a swarm of insects, but these insects were the size of battleships. They didn't fire weapons in any traditional sense. Instead, they seemed to drain energy and matter directly from their targets, leaving behind empty shells that crumbled into dust. "Are you recording this?" asked his sensor operator. "Every second," Jae-hyun confirmed. "Command needs to see what's coming." The Council defense fleet arrived 2 hours later. Jae-hyun watched 12 heavy cruisers and twice as many escort ships move into formation. It should have been enough firepower to stop any reasonable threat. But these attackers were not reasonable. The Council ships opened fire at maximum range. Energy beams and missile salvos that could crack planets struck the swarm with devastating force, and did absolutely nothing. The attackers simply absorbed the energy and kept coming. When they reached the Council formation, the real horror began. The swarm ships attached themselves to the Council vessels like parasites. Within minutes, proud warships that had protected the galaxy for centuries became empty metal shells, their crews and power systems completely drained. Elder Thoros received the emergency reports in his private chambers. He had been dealing with resource disputes and political conflicts for months. This was something entirely different, something that threatened the very existence of the Council. "How many ships did we lose?" he asked his military aide. "The entire Kepler defense fleet. 47 vessels. No survivors." Thoros felt something he had not experienced in decades. Fear. Raw, primitive fear that made his logical mind struggle to function. "Who are they? What do they want?" "We don't know, sir. They appeared from deep space beyond our sensor networks. No attempt at communication. They seem to be harvesting." The term sent chills through Thoros. In the old stories, before the Council brought order to the galaxy, there were legends of the harvester swarm. Ancient enemies that consumed entire star systems, leaving nothing behind but empty space. Over the following weeks, the pattern became clear. The attackers struck at remote systems first, testing Council defenses. When they found weaknesses, They moved deeper into Council space. Their technology was beyond anything the member species had ever encountered. The Arachnid Collective tried their famous swarm tactics, sending thousands of fighter craft against the invaders. The small ships were absorbed just as easily as the large ones. The mountain folk tried brute force attacks with their heaviest weapons. The energy was simply consumed by the enemy shields. The crystal resonance attempted communication through harmonic frequencies. The response was static that drove their operators insane. The machine intelligences of the logical collective tried to hack enemy systems. Their finest programs were corrupted and turned against their own networks. For the first time in 1,000 years, the Galactic Council faced an enemy they could not defeat through conventional means. Lim Yunji analyzed the intercepted Council communications from her listening post in human space. The intelligence officer had been tracking Council activities since the exile began. What she was seeing now worried her more than any human grudge against their former allies. The Harvester Swarm, she read from her analysis report. Historical. Records suggest they were a nomadic species that consumed entire sectors before vanishing into deep space. Council historians claimed they went extinct. Apparently not, said her assistant. Current projections show them reaching the core systems within 18 months if they maintain current advancement rates. Yunji pulled up tactical displays showing the swarm's movement patterns. They were methodical, efficient, and absolutely ruthless. Each conquered system provided them with more resources to build more ships. At this rate, they would be unstoppable within 2 years. Have the Council attempted to contact us? She asked. Negative, but we're detecting increased diplomatic traffic between Council species and neutral systems. They're looking for allies. Anyone willing to help? The smart ones are fleeing Council space entirely. The others are trying to negotiate surrender terms. Back in Council space, the situation was deteriorating rapidly. Internal disputes that had been simmering for months now erupted into open conflict. The Trading Federation accused the mining collective of hoarding resources needed for defense. The mountain folk blamed the arachnids for military failures. Everyone blamed everyone else for the crisis. Order, Thoros shouted during what might have been the most chaotic council session in history. We face extinction, and you argue about trade routes? Easy for you to say, snapped the arachnid representative. Your homeworld is in the core. Mine is 3 jumps from the current battle line. If you had proper defenses, began the mountain folk delegate, if your weapons actually worked. Interrupted the technical union speaker. The arguments went in circles while the harvester swarm continued its advance. Traditional council military doctrine called for organized defense using established formations and proven tactics. But those tactics had been developed to fight other council species, civilized enemies who followed rules of war. The harvesters followed no rules. They took no prisoners. They made no demands. They simply consumed everything in their path and moved on to the next target. In desperation, some council members began suggesting increasingly extreme measures. The logical collective proposed abandoning the outer systems entirely and fortifying the core. The Life Preservation Society wanted to surrender and hope for mercy. The military coalition demanded conscription of all able-bodied beings from every member species. None of these solutions addressed the real problem. The council was fighting an enemy they didn't understand, with tactics that weren't working. They needed new ideas, fresh perspectives, creative solutions that broke established patterns. They needed the kind of thinking they had expelled from council space 5 years earlier. There is one option we haven't discussed, said a junior representative from the diplomatic corps during a closed session. The chamber fell silent. Everyone knew what she was about to suggest. We could ask the humans for assistance. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Half the council erupted in outrage at the suggestion. The other half sat in uncomfortable silence, considering possibilities they didn't want to acknowledge. Absolutely not, declared the arachnid representative. They are exiles, criminals. We cannot show such weakness. What weakness? Asked the young diplomat. They are arguably the most successful military force this galaxy has ever produced. Their irregular tactics and emotional decision-making might be exactly what we need, against an enemy that defies logical response. Thoros found himself in the uncomfortable position of actually considering the suggestion. Human military commanders had indeed been remarkably effective during their time in council space. Their willingness to take risks, to try solutions that seemed impossible, had solved problems that stumped more logical approaches. But asking for human assistance would mean admitting the council had been wrong. It would mean acknowledging that the very traits they had condemned as dangerous might actually be valuable. "The humans have no reason to help us," pointed out the resonant delegate. "We expelled them, branded them as threats to galactic peace. Why would they risk their lives for those who rejected them?" "Because they're human," the young diplomat replied. "Emotional, unpredictable. They might help simply because it's the right thing to do." The debate continued for hours, but the military situation continued to deteriorate. 3 more systems fell to the harvesters. Refugee fleets clogged the space lanes. Panic was spreading faster than the enemy advance. Finally, in a session closed, to all but the senior council members, Elder Thoros made a decision that would have been unthinkable months earlier. "Prepare a message for transmission to human space," he ordered his communications staff. "Unofficial channels only. Coded as a request for consultation regarding external threats." It wasn't an apology. It wasn't even a direct request for help, but it was the first crack in the wall of pride that had separated humanity from the council for 5 long years. In her monitoring station, Han Yuna detected the coded transmission within hours of its broadcast. The message was carefully worded, to avoid any admission of weakness or error, but the meaning was clear enough. The council was in trouble, and they were reaching out to the people they had cast into exile. "What should we do?" asked her communications team. Yuna stared at the message for a long time. 5 years of exile. 5 years of building something new in the darkness beyond council space. 5 years of proving that humanity didn't need the council to survive and thrive. But the harvester swarm threatened more than just the council. If they consumed the entire galactic civilization, they would eventually turn their attention to human space as well. "Send word to the colonial governors," she decided. "And to Admiral Sungjin. It's time to decide what kind of people we want to be." Admiral No Sungjin stood before the emergency session of the Human Colonial Assembly. Representatives from every human settlement had gathered on hope to debate the most important decision their young civilization had ever faced. The council's message was clear, Sungjin reported to the assembly. They face extinction from the harvester swarm. Current projections show the swarm reaching human space within 5 years if the council falls. The Great Hall erupted in debate, voices raised in anger, fear, and bitter memories of exile. "Let them burn," shouted Song Minho from the back of the chamber. The former soldier had lost his wife and children during the forced evacuation, separated by council checkpoints that delayed medical transports. "They cast us out, called us dangerous, now they want our help." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Many humans carried similar wounds from the exile. Families torn apart, careers destroyed, homes abandoned to alien indifference. But Anjuwon stood to address the assembly. The diplomat had been working quietly to maintain contact with moderate voices in council space. "I understand the anger," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the hall. "I feel it too. But this isn't about the council anymore. It's about what kind of people we choose to be." "They made that choice for us," Minho replied bitterly. "They decided we were too dangerous to live among civilized species. And if we let them die out of spite, what does that make us?" Juwon asked. "Better than them, or exactly what they said we were?" Governor Kim from New Busan raised his hand for attention. "The practical question is whether we can actually help. Our military is strong, but it's designed to defend human space. Can we really make a difference against an enemy that's destroying council fleets?" Admiral Sungjin activated a holographic display showing the latest intelligence reports. "Our technology has advanced significantly since the exile. The Void Dweller Alliance has provided us with capabilities the Council doesn't possess. More importantly, our tactical doctrine is fundamentally different from theirs." The display showed comparative battle analyses. Council forces fought in rigid formations using predictable tactics that had worked for centuries against other Council species. The harvesters had learned to counter these approaches within weeks. Human military doctrine emphasizes adaptation, improvisation, and accepting casualties to achieve objectives, Songjin continued. The Council avoids risk. We embrace it when necessary. Engineer Yang Soo-young stood to address the technical aspects. Our ships now use quantum field manipulation drives. We can move faster than anything in Council space. Our weapons incorporate Void Dweller technology that operates on principles the harvesters may not have encountered. But can we trust the Council? Asked Representative Lee from the mining colonies. What happens after we save them? Do they welcome us back, or do they find new reasons to exile us once the crisis passes? The question hung in the air like a weapon waiting to fire. Trust once broken was the hardest thing to rebuild. Elder Thoros was asking himself the same question from his private chambers on the Council station. The coded message had been sent, but no response had come from human space. Perhaps they were debating. Perhaps they were laughing at Council desperation. Perhaps they simply didn't care about their former oppressors. Any word from the border monitoring stations? He asked his aide. Nothing official, but long-range sensors have detected unusual energy signatures near the human border. Ships moving in formation. Thoros felt a flicker of something he hadn't experienced in years. Hope. But hope was dangerous for a leader facing extinction. It made logical decisions harder when emotion clouded judgment. The military situation continued to deteriorate. The harvester swarm had adapted to every tactic. The Council tried. When the mountain folk attempted to use asteroid fields as defensive barriers, the harvesters simply consumed the asteroids and built more ships. When the Technical Union deployed automated defense platforms, the enemy turned the platform's own weapons against Council forces. We need new strategies, General Craxon told the Military Council. Everything we try, they counter within days. What about guerrilla warfare? Suggested Colonel Voss. Hit-and-run tactics, irregular formations? The senior officers looked uncomfortable. Such tactics were considered dishonorable by Council military tradition. Proper warfare was conducted between organized forces following established rules of engagement. The harvesters don't follow rules, Craxon pointed out. Maybe it's time we stopped following them too. But changing military doctrine that had been refined over millennia was like asking a mountain to become a river. The Council was structured for order, hierarchy, and predictable responses. Chaos was the enemy of everything they had built. Meanwhile, in human space, the debates continued. Some colonies voted to offer assistance. Others demanded isolation until the threat passed. The assembly was deadlocked between compassion and self-preservation. Captain John Hishong watched the debates from her ship Defiance, docked at Hope Station. Her vessel was one of the new experimental designs that combined human engineering with Void Dweller technology. If humanity decided to act, ships like hers would lead the way. What do you think, Captain? Asked her first officer. I think we're about to find out what humans are really made of, Hishong replied. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Dr. Ko In-soo, chief medical officer of the human fleet, had been treating refugees who had escaped from Council space ahead of the harvester advance. Their stories painted a picture of horror that transcended political boundaries. Entire worlds stripped bare, one arachnid refugee reported through translators. Cities consumed, billions dead. The harvesters don't just kill, they erase. Nothing remains. Dr. Ko had seen enough war to know that some things transcended politics. These aren't soldiers or politicians, he told the assembly during an emergency session. They're civilians, families, children. They're dying while we debate. The Council leadership may deserve their fate, added Dr. Ko, but the innocent beings under their protection don't. Representative after representative stood to share similar stories. Council civilians who had shown kindness to humans during the exile, scientists who had collaborated on medical research, even some officials who had privately opposed the expulsion. Song Minho, the most vocal opponent of assistance, finally stood to speak. The chamber fell silent, expecting another angry rejection of Council aid. My family died because of Council bureaucracy, he said quietly. They delayed our medical transport for security screening, while my daughter's condition worsened. I hate them for that. I will always hate them for that. He paused, struggling with emotions that had burned in him for 5 years. But letting children die because I hate their government makes me no better than the officials who let my daughter die. If we have the power to save innocents and choose not to act, how are we different from them? The vote, when it finally came, was closer than anyone expected. The Assembly approved military assistance by a margin of just 7 votes. But that was enough. Admiral Sung Jin received his orders the next morning. Prepare the fleet for deployment. We're going to war. Within hours, human space erupted into activity. Ships that had been scattered across dozens of systems began converging on assembly points. The experimental vessels with Void Dweller technology were given priority for combat. Upgrades. Captain Haesung received her mission briefing as the Defiance completed final preparations. Your ship is designated as lead scout for the advance force. Your job is to get close enough to the harvesters to identify weaknesses the Council forces couldn't find. Understood, Admiral. What about rules of engagement? Sung Jin smiled grimly. The harvesters don't follow any rules, neither will we. Use whatever tactics give us the best chance of winning. 3 days later, Elder Thoros received a message that changed everything. Not a coded transmission or diplomatic communique, but a simple statement broadcast on all frequencies. This is Admiral No Sung-jin of the Human Colonial Fleet. We are en route to assist in the defense of Council space. Prepare to coordinate joint operations. For the first time in months, Thoros allowed himself to feel something approaching relief. The humans were coming. The same unpredictable, emotional, dangerous humans the Council had exiled were now their last hope for survival. Sir, his aide reported, our border sensors are detecting massive energy signatures entering Council space. Count is over 200 human vessels, including ship designs we've never seen before. Thoros nodded slowly. 5 years ago, he had voted to expel humanity because they were too dangerous to coexist with civilized species. Now he was about to discover if they were dangerous enough to save civilization itself. In the depths of space, Captain Haesung's scouts began their approach toward the first harvester positions. Behind them came a fleet that represented everything humanity had learned in exile. Innovation born from necessity, courage forged in abandonment, and the kind of stubborn refusal to give up that had carried humans across the galaxy. The Council was about to learn what they had really lost when they drove the humans out. The first contact between human and harvester forces came at the edge of the Vega system. Captain Jun Haesung watched her tactical display as 3 harvester scouts approached her position. These were smaller than the massive ships that had been consuming Council fleets, but they moved with the same predatory efficiency. I'll stop, she ordered. Let them come to us. I want to see what they do. The harvesters moved closer, their energy signatures spiking as they prepared to drain power from Haesung's ship. Standard Council doctrine would have retreated or opened fire at maximum range. Haesung did neither. Full power to quantum shields, she commanded. Let's see how they like Void Dweller technology. The lead harvester attached itself to the Defiance's hull, expecting to drain the ship's power systems like it had done to countless Council vessels. Instead, its draining beam struck the quantum field barrier and simply disappeared into folded space. Sir, reported her tactical officer with barely contained excitement. Their draining technology can't penetrate quantum field manipulation. They're trying to consume energy that isn't technically there. Perfect, Haesung smiled. Target the attached ship with focused plasma, point-blank range. The harvester vessel, locked onto the Defiance's hull, couldn't evade the close-range attack. It died in a flash of superheated gas and twisted metal. The other 2 scouts retreated immediately, broadcasting rapid-fire communications to the main swarm. Looks like we got their attention, observed her navigator. 20 light-years away, Admiral Sung-jin received Haesung's combat report aboard his flagship New Terra. The news sent ripples of hope through the human fleet. For the first time since the war began, someone had found a way to hurt the harvesters. Pass the word to all ships, Sung-jin ordered. Quantum shields are effective against harvester drain technology. Captain Hisong has just proven these things can be killed. Dr. Ko In-soo was aboard the hospital ship Mercy when the first council casualties arrived, wounded from a dozen different species, beings who had been fighting a hopeless war for months. The medical bay filled with the strange sounds of alien suffering. "Doctor," his chief nurse reported, "the arachnid soldiers are refusing treatment. They say they don't trust human medicine." Ko In-soo looked at the injured insectoid warriors. Fear and pain had overcome their racial pride, but generations of separation died hard. "Tell them I'm not treating them as a human helping aliens. I'm treating them as a doctor helping patients. Period." He moved between the wounded, offering comfort in whatever language his universal translator could manage. A mountain folk engineer, with radiation burns, a resonant whose harmonic crystals had been shattered by sonic weapons, an arachnid pilot whose ship had been consumed around him while he barely escaped in a life pod. "Why?" asked the injured pilot in broken standard. "Why help us? Council. Council threw you out." Ko In-soo carefully cleaned the pilot's wounds while considering his answer. "Because you're hurt," he said finally. "That's reason enough." The main battle began 3 days later in the Perseus Nebula. The Harvester Swarm had massed over 300 capital ships for what they clearly intended as a decisive strike against the remaining Council forces. Admiral Sungjin brought his fleet in from an unexpected direction, using the nebula's ionization to mask their approach. "Council forces, this is Admiral Sungjin," he broadcast on all frequencies. "We're coming in fast and low. Break your formations and follow our lead." The Council fleet commanders hesitated. Breaking formation violated every principle of proper military conduct, but their proper conduct had been failing for months. "All ships," Elder Thoros himself spoke from the Council command vessel. "Follow human tactical guidance. That is a direct order." Captain Hyecheong led the first assault wave. Her ship Defiance, along with 50 other experimental vessels, dove straight into the heart of the Harvester formation. Council observers watched in amazement as the humans ignored every rule of space combat. Instead of maintaining safe distances, human ships closed to knife-fighting range. Instead of preserving their forces, they accepted casualties to achieve tactical objectives. Instead of organized formations, they scattered like a swarm of angry wasps, each ship operating independently but somehow coordinating perfectly. "Ramming speed," Hyecheong ordered as her ship closed with a Harvester heavy cruiser. Her crew, trained in human naval traditions that went back to wooden ships on ancient Earth, understood completely. The Defiance struck the Harvester vessel at full velocity. Quantum shields focused into a cutting edge that sliced through enemy armor like paper. The impact destroyed both ships, but it also created a gap in the Harvester formation that other human vessels exploited ruthlessly. "Sir," reported the tactical officer aboard Admiral Sungjin's flagship, "Captain Hyecheong's ship is gone." But her attack broke their center line. Sungjin felt the familiar weight of command in wartime. Good people dying for necessary objectives. "Signal the fleet. Press the attack. Make her sacrifice count." The human assault shattered the Harvester formation in ways the enemy had never experienced. Where Council forces fought defensively, trying to minimize losses, humans fought aggressively, trading ships for strategic advantage. Where Council tactics were predictable, human actions seemed almost random, but achieved devastating results. Human destroyer sacrificed itself to take out a Harvester command ship. A squadron of fighters flew directly into an enemy formation, accepting annihilation to clear the way for follow-up attacks. Human commanders made decisions in seconds that Council officers would debate for hours. But the tide really turned when the Void Dweller reinforcements arrived. The ancient machine intelligences brought weapons that bent reality itself, supported by human crews who understood both technology and sacrifice in ways neither species could achieve alone. "Their pattern recognition is failing," reported the Void Dweller tactical intelligence directly into Admiral Sungjin's mind. "Human unpredictability is overloading their adaptive protocols." The Harvesters had spent millennia perfecting their ability to counter logical, predictable enemies. They could adapt to any strategy given enough time to analyze it. But human tactics weren't based purely on logic. They incorporated emotion, intuition, and sheer stubborn refusal to accept defeat. When the main Harvester mothership finally fell, consumed by quantum fire from a human Void Dweller hybrid weapon, the remaining swarm ships began to retreat. For the first time in their recorded history, the Harvesters had been not just stopped, but driven back. Elder Thoros watched the victory from his command chamber, trying to process what he had just witnessed. The same humans the Council had condemned as dangerously unpredictable had just saved galactic civilization through that very unpredictability. The aftermath brought revelations that changed everything. Dr. Ko Insu worked tirelessly in the emergency medical stations, treating wounded from both sides without question. His medical teams, following his example, established field hospitals that became symbols of human compassion. "You save everyone," observed a wounded arachnid commander. "Even enemies." "No enemies here," Ko Insu replied while tending to a harvester. "Prisoner. The first one ever taken alive. Just patients who need help." The harvester prisoner, when it finally communicated, revealed truths that shook the foundations of galactic understanding. The swarm wasn't just destructive, it was desperate. Their home dimension was dying, consumed by entropy that threatened their very existence. They weren't invading, translated the Void Dweller linguistics expert. They were fleeing, taking resources to build new homes in dimensions they could survive in. It was Ambassador Kang Daeho, returned to Council space for the first time in 5 years, who proposed the solution that ended the war entirely. "What if we helped them?" he suggested during the emergency peace negotiations. "Human Void Dweller, technology could open stable dimensional gateways. Give them a way home that doesn't require consuming our reality." The Council representative stared at him in amazement. "Help the enemy?" asked the arachnid delegate. "Help refugees," Daeho corrected. "That's what they really are. Refugees who were using the only method they knew to escape extinction." This final peace treaty was signed aboard Admiral Sungjin's flagship, with representatives from the Council, humanity, the Void Dwellers, and the Harvester Collective. The agreement established humanity as equal partners in galactic civilization, with expanded rights and territories that reflected their contributions to the war effort. But more importantly, it established new principles that would guide galactic civilization for generations to come. Diversity of thought was recognized as a strength rather than a threat. Emotional decision-making was acknowledged as valuable when pure logic failed, and the capacity for forgiveness was elevated as the highest virtue of civilized beings. Elder Thoros spoke last at the signing ceremony. 5 years ago, this council made a decision based on fear. We saw difference as danger, emotion as weakness, unpredictability as threat. We were wrong. He looked directly at Ambassador Daeho. "Humanity, we ask not just for your forgiveness, but for your partnership in building something better than what came before." Daeho's response was simple, but it echoed across the galaxy. "We never wanted to be above you or below you. We just wanted to stand beside you." They had been called too dangerous for civilized space. In the end, they proved to be exactly dangerous enough to save civilization itself.